In May 2015, one block of Manhattan's West Side sold for $870 million. The man who sold it had started buying there in the early 1980s. The parking lot at the center of that block cost him $2.4 million. He never built anything on it. He painted lines on the asphalt and let people leave their cars there for 30 years. Downtown, the highest returning dirt is often the dirt with nothing on it. So let's price one out. What a lot costs, what it earns per espace, and why the best margin in real estate is also the most fragile, until you can look at any empty block downtown and tell whether it's a business or a bet. Because most surface parking lots in America are not parking businesses. They are something else, wearing a parking lot as a disguise. And the people who made more money out of parking than any lot owner in history never bought a single lot. Start at the bottom. A small town surface lot 20 or 30 spaces. One block off a main street trades in the low hundreds of thousands. Tashin is no building to inspect, no roof, no tenants, no environmental report on a buried tank. The transaction is almost embarrassingly simple. You are buying dirt with a coat of asphalt on it. And that simplicity is real. It follows you for the whole life of the thing. A building has a capital expenditure cycle roof, HVAC, elevator, plumbing, the 10-year list that quietly eats your returns. A parking lot has resealing and restripping. That's the cycle. It's a few $1,000s every few years on a small lot, and it can be deferred without anybody moving out. Move to a real downtown and the number changes shape. In 2018, a parking lot on East Bay Street in Charleston, South Carolina sold for $4.06 million, less than a third of an acre. 40 spaces. That works out to just over $100,000 per parking space. And it had sold roughly 3 years earlier for about half that. Now watch what the buyer did with it. They weren't starting a parking company. They were opening a restaurant and event space up the street, and they needed somewhere to put the valet. Hold on to that. It comes back. Then here is the top of the market. In June 2024, a parking operator called L&R Group paid $20 million for a 2-acre block in downtown Los Angeles. 80,300 square feet. That's $249 a square foot. For pavement. In that same market, in that same window, office buildings, actual buildings, with elevators and tenants and rent rolls were trading for less per square foot than that empty lot. Which should stop you for a second, because if bare asphalt outprices a building, the asphalt is not what's being priced. The other number worth knowing here is what it costs to make parking instead of buying it. A structured parking space, a garage. Not a lot runs $25,000 to $50,000 per space to build. Nationally, it's more like $30,000 to $40,000. Put it underground in Chicago, and you are at $50,000 to $70,000 a space. That number is the reason your existing lot has any pricing power at all. Remember it. It's going to come apart later. So you own a lot. Where does the money come from? 2 places, and they behave completely differently. The first is monthly parkers, contract parkers. People who work downtown and buy a space for the month, typically $100 to $300 depending on the city. This is boring, predictable, low churn revenue, and it's the part that makes a lot financeable. The second is transient parking, hourly and daily. Higher rate per HR, but it swings with events, weather, tourism, and whether the office tower next door called everybody back in. Revenue per space per amount tells you almost everything about a lot before you look at anything else. Sitting next to an airport, you are looking at something like $350 a space. A ski resort, around $300. Near a stadium or an arena district, roughly $250. General downtown, about $200. Residential neighborhood, $50. Same asphalt, 7 times the revenue. That is the entire business in one line. You are not selling parking, you are selling proximity. The asphalt is identical everywhere. The only thing you actually own is how badly someone needs to be within a 2-minute walk of it. And notice what that means for your risk. A lot next to a stadium is a fantastic business about 80 nights a year and an empty rectangle the rest of the time. A lot serving a single office tower is a bet on one landlord's leasing team. When the tower next door loses a tenant, you don't get a warning letter. Your monthly parkers just stop renewing. Run the arithmetic on a real one. A 121-space lot next to a downtown commercial district at that $200 a month figure. Gross is about $290,000 a year, and that assumes you actually fill it. You don't operate it yourself. A professional parking manager takes 10 to 20% of gross, call it 15%. That's about $43,500. You are at roughly $246,000. And this is exactly where every parking lot's print money article on the internet stops. Because $246,000 is not your profit. Property tax hasn't been paid yet. Neither has insurance, and you are inviting the public to drive 2-ton objects onto your land at speed, which insurers have opinions about. Neither has lighting, resurfacing, restriping, snow removal, security, or the payment system. Assume that lot is assessed around $3 million, and the effective tax rate is 2%. That's $60,000 a year gone. Give the rest another $25,000. Now you are at about $162,000, which is still a genuinely good business. On $290,000 of gross revenue, you kept roughly 56 cents on the dollar, and you did it with no tenants, no inventory, no staff, and no roof. Nothing else in real estate is that clean. So why isn't everyone doing this? Because of that $60,000. Look at it again. Property tax is the single largest line item on a surface parking lot. Not labor, not maintenance. Tax. And property tax is charged on the value of the land, which has nothing to do with how much parking you sold. Which means the thing you own is not really a parking business. It's a piece of land that happens to generate just enough cash to pay its own property tax bill while you hold it. That's the disguise. That is what most surface lots in an American downtown actually are. They are land banks. The asphalt isn't the asset. The asphalt is the excuse to hold the dirt. The lines and the sign and the guy in the booth exist to cover the carrying cost of a piece of land whose real job is to sit there, appreciating, until somebody offers a number big enough to justify paving over it. Which brings us back to Manhattan. Jerry Gottsman started buying on the far west side in the early 1980s, when it was warehouses and meatpacking and nobody wanted it. His logic was not visionary. It was almost mundane people who lived in the city and only drove on weekends needed somewhere cheap to store a car during the week. So he bought a lot for $2.4 million and rented out weekday car storage. For 25 years, that's all it was. Then in June 2009, the first section of the High Line opened. An abandoned elevated rail line turned into a park, running directly past his asphalt. The neighborhood it ran through stopped being warehouses. In May 2015, Edison Properties sold that full block to HFZ Capital Group for $870 million. The site came with about 800,000 square feet of air rights, and the price worked out to more than $1,100 per buildable square foot, a record at the time for a Manhattan condo development. He never developed it. He never had to. The parking paid the taxes and the city built the value. By 2015, that patience had compounded into a portfolio worth roughly $4 billion. And this is not a Manhattan quirk. Through the 2000s boom, by one accounting, about a quarter of downtown Phoenix sat vacant or in surface parking, not because nobody wanted downtown Phoenix, but because holding the dirt and waiting was outperforming building on it. And you can watch it happening right now in Chicago. For decades, a handful of families owned the vacant lots around the United Center and sold cheap game day parking to Bulls and Blackhawks fans. Ordinary parking operators running an ordinary parking business. Then the arena's owners decided to build. Over about 19 months, an entity tied to Jerry Reinsdorf spent $44.7 million buying those lots up. They are now part of the 1901 project, a 55-acre, $7 billion development that broke ground in June 2026, with a music hall, a hotel, and thousands of apartments. The parking operators didn't fail. They got paid. That was always the exit, they just had to own the dirt long enough for somebody to want it. That's the machine. Every empty lot in the middle of an expensive city is someone's option contract on that city's future, and the parking revenue is just the premium payment. Which means the ways you lose have nothing to do with parking. Failure when you get taxed out of your own success. Go back to the arithmetic and notice something ugly. Your revenue is spaces times rate times occupancy, and all three have ceilings. You cannot add spaces to a fixed rectangle. You cannot raise rates far past the garage down the street. You cannot exceed 100% occupancy. But your assessment tracks the land, and the land tracks the neighborhood. So the better your neighborhood does, the worse your lot performs as a business. Rents rise, cranes go up, the assessor revalues your dirt, and your tax bill climbs toward a revenue line that structurally cannot follow it. You end up paying appreciation tax on an income stream that has no way to grow into it. That is not a bug. That is the system doing exactly what it was designed to do, making it progressively more expensive to leave valuable land empty. It is the mechanism that eventually forces every land bank to develop or sell. And the owner who misjudges that timing, who holds through the squeeze waiting for a number that doesn't arrive, funds the wait out of pocket for years. Failure to your moat was a law, and the law is being repealed. Ask why parking was scarce enough to be worth $249 a square foot in the first place. It wasn't only demand. For 70 years, American cities required it. Minimum parking requirements forced nearly every new building to include a set number of spaces, and at $25,000 to $50,000 a space to build, a lot of projects found it cheaper to lean on the lots that already existed. Your scarcity was written into the zoning code. That code is now being rewritten. Minneapolis and Austin eliminated parking minimums. Chicago dropped them for most new development near transit in 2025. Denver did the same. Baltimore scrapped them citywide, signed into law in November 2025. Washington State capped most residential projects at half a space per unit. Be careful about what that actually does, because the internet will overstate it. Removing minimums doesn't destroy demand for existing parking overnight, it mostly reduces how much new parking gets built. Nobody's tearing up your lot next year. But it's a slow leak in the thesis. If your reason for owning was they can't build more parking here, a growing list of cities just made that sentence less true. So what do you actually make? Parking assets trade at cap rates of roughly 4 to 10%, and where you land in that range is itself a tell. A lot in a market where everyone expects development sells at a low cap rate, buyers are paying up for the land, not the income. A lot at 10% is a market telling you nobody's coming. Take the 121 space lot, about $162,000 a year net. At an 8% cap rate, that's a property worth roughly $2 million, which means you are clearing about 8% on your money, a solid, unspectacular yield you could roughly match in a dozen other places. If that's the whole plan, parking is fine. It is not special. Now run it the other way. Same lot, same $2 million. But you are not buying an income stream, you are buying 20 years of optionality. The parking covers the taxes and pays you $162,000 a year while you wait, which is about $3.2 million of income over those 20 years. And if downtown does what downtowns in growing cities do and the land triples, you also collect $6 million for the dirt. Same asphalt, same booth, same guy taking tickets, completely different business. The parking never was the business. It was the thing that let you afford to wait. Which brings us to the people who took that idea further than any lot owner ever has. On December 2nd, 2008, in the deepest week of the financial crisis, the city of Chicago announced it was leasing 75 years of revenue from roughly 36,000 metered street parking spaces to a private consortium led by Morgan Stanley. The price was $1.15 billion paid up front. The city council approved it 2 days later, 40-5. The agreement ran more than 500 pages, and the aldermen had roughly 72 hours with it. The investors made their entire $1.15 billion back in about 10 years. By the end of 2024, the meters had generated $1.97 billion, with 2024 the best year yet at $160.9 million. The lease runs to 2083. There are nearly 60 years left on it. And here is the part that matters for everything we just walked through. They never bought a lot. They never paved anything. They pay no property tax on that asphalt, because it isn't their asphalt. The city still owns the streets, still repaves them, still plows them in January. They bought the one thing in this entire business that was ever actually worth owning the right to charge. So if you are looking at a lot, ask the only question that matters, not what it earns. Ask what it's waiting for. Because a parking lot is the rare business where the product isn't the point. Nobody in this video got rich selling parking. They got rich owning the ground underneath the demand for it, and letting the cars pay the tax bill until the ground was worth more than the cars. The asphalt was never the asset. The asphalt was just what you do with land while you wait.